managing your inventory isn't just an administrative task. It's more than just compliance. It directly impacts service consistency and technician efficiency, and even the company profitability.
Welcome to another Routes to Riches podcast with Kemp Anderson. I'm PCT editor Brad Harbison, and in this episode, Kemp Anderson and Grant Sinnott of Kemp Anderson Consultant are joined by Tom Forshaw and Finn Forshaw of distributor Forshaw Inc. to discuss chemical inventory management and pest control operations. A little bit about Forshaw. They're a third-generation national distributor of pest control products, chemicals, and equipment. And like a lot of pest control companies, Forshaw is privately owned, family-run business. The company was founded in 1961 by Tom Forshaw II in Charlotte, North Carolina. And again, the company began in 1961 as a supplier to the agriculture side, but it's since grown into a leading supplier of specialized pest management products. And today, the company operates 11 branches across the U.S. and is led by CEO Tom Forshaw IV. So in our podcast today, we're going to discuss why inventory accuracy matters, some common compliance mistakes that operators make, and what tends to surface during buyer diligence. So start off with Tom and Finn. And just to start with, how does tight chemical inventory control directly impact profitability and risk in pest control businesses?
Well, thanks for having us, Brad. Inventory isn't just managing your inventory isn't just an administrative task. It's more than just compliance. It directly impacts service consistency and technician efficiency, and even the company profitability.
And Tom and Finn, again, you guys see a lot of different pest control operation. What's sort of the most common inventory mistake you see? In other words, like the issue that quietly creates compliant problems or margin loss.
Yeah, so we have a lot of new customers that come on board that don't have visibility into their own stock, which causes frustrations amongst the team and obviously amongst leadership as well. So really one of the things that we love to talk about with our partners is, again, clear data visibility, but also just, knowing what's in the stock, knowing that it's going to be a quick inventory turn, and that your technicians have what you need to go get the job done.
And again, you guys see a lot of companies and in situations when inventory systems are maybe not as tight as they should be, where does profit typically leak?
Having too much inventory is a problem that we see often. Companies that are being more tactical in their purchasing and their procurement habits are buying what they think they need and not planning in advance for what they know they will need. So SKUs can run out of, the number of SKUs can increase faster sometimes, which also leads to compliance challenges with knowing which products you have and training your team to use those products properly. From a profitability standpoint, there's a lot of money that's being invested in inventory that's not necessarily needed at that time to service the customers.
And let's take a look at the importance of chemical inventory when evaluating how well a pest control business performs. And I wanted to ask Kemp and Grant, when buyers look at a company, what do chemical controls tell them about the quality of the operation?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. The first is that, when they come into your warehouse, they want to see everything on shelves, clean and organized. I mean, right? A clean chemical room is a sign of a clean run business. So I think there's just a little bit of an emotional reaction to how well is your chemical organized? How fast can you tell them and give them the data about what you have in stock? Does it take a month because you have to go through and count everything manually on shelves, or can you send them a quick Excel report that has all of that data readily available? I think there's a reaction to that lets them know how well the business is being professionally managed. That's really interesting. I also think knowing your chemical costs. So is it a couple percent, or are you maybe overspending on some chemicals that you might necessarily not be needing? And I think Tom made a great point. Some people buy 2 or 3 years of chemical at once, but then it just sits on the shelf for a long time. So having the appropriate amount of chemical, I think, is another indicator of a well-run business.
I think too, you could add, is everything on the shelf up to date? Or are there things on the shelf that maybe shouldn't be on the shelf? They're expired. Are there unmarked containers? You see that sometimes, and it'll make a buyer cautious. It'll make a buyer concerned. So I think there's got to be integrity on what you use, how you use it, and when you use it. And you can get into I think a pretty long discussion, and maybe Tom and Finn can jump in about the difference too between generics and how those influence perhaps efficacy and again when it gets used and how it gets used and so I think that sometimes the PCOs are using generics when maybe it's not in their best interest and could ultimately even impact retention. Guys, I don't know if you want to jump in on that and what you see there from time to time.
Yeah, so we're always looking for alignment with what is the company promising? What kind of service level are they promising? And what products are they using? If we see a company that is focusing on reducing callbacks or customer experience on their side, then we really do expect to see a product that has a good efficacy and not just the lowest price product available. So that's um, I think it goes back to the confidence in the knowing that the PMP is number one, aware of what's in his warehouse, and number two, knows that the reason they bought those products. The one thing that really degrades that confidence pretty quickly is we've heard conversations where a potential buyer went in and asked the PMP, how much chemical they have and how long is that going to last. And when the owner and the managers don't know, that really does erode that confidence to the buyer, and it tells you a lot about how other parts of the business are being run as well.
Yeah, and it can signal planning too, right? I mean, one of us mentioned you can have excess products on the shelf that could be there a year from now. Is that necessary? Are you tying up your cash flow? Is that in the best interest of the employee, the customer, the business, all those things? So, how are you a strategic planner? And is that strategic planning a part of the business and is it visible? And it can be visible in a chemical room for sure, where you see, oh my gosh, look at all this stuff. You can stand there and say they're not going to use this for a year. They won't be, why would you tie up your money and do that? And is that in the best interest of the business, the employees, and the customers? And again, it signals, how strategically run the business may or may not be, and how the cash flow is managed as well.
Yeah. And one thing I was wondering, guys, is like, you see a lot, obviously you deal with this on a day-to-day basis. Like, what are the people doing that are doing a really good job? How do they make it easy to manage their chemical and their inventory and their purchasing? Like, I don't think we're here to make it harder for people. Like, what are things that people can do to make this a really easy and seamless process instead of a bunch of extra work?
Yeah, I think first off, you can't manage what you don't measure. So you need good visibility into inventory, and you also need a plan. So you need a plan of what type of products you want to have. You need a plan of what quantity of those products you need based on your services that you're expected to have in the next month or several months. And so you need products that support those service models. Um, so to look at purchasing patterns, you can look at technician usage. You can look at existing inventory levels. And technology has changed a lot in the last few years, but definitely a lot in the last couple of decades. And it's gotten a lot easier to track products for PMPs to track products than they did, 10, 20 years ago.
Maybe
And
this is a good opportunity, Tom, for you and Finn to touch on your software Foresight and some of the features and benefits of that. And part of what we definitely wanted to get to today for the listeners out there is, obviously chemical cost is a cost of goods sold. It's a COG. It's fleet chemical labor. So we're talking about a COG, number one. It's a significant expense on a lot of P&Ls. If it's managed properly, if chemical cost is managed properly, it reverberates through the business, but it shows up on the P&L in terms of chemical cost, which when managed properly can increase the profit, which then ultimately increases the value of the business. So I think one of the things that's super interesting about Forshaw is your software. So maybe this is a chance to sort of talk about what that does and how it can benefit the owners and company value ultimately.
Absolutely. Would love to touch on that. So I mean, I'd say as a company, we're big proponents of technology and innovation. And also really our focus is on strategic partnerships. So we developed Foresight, our business enablement tool, years ago with hand in hand with some of our close strategic partners, essentially identifying, where are the pain points, where are the gaps, where are the friction points that people experience day to day or overall from a PMPN on the business front. So how can we provide a system that helps with that takes away some of the manual touches, it takes away some of those friction points so that operators can really focus on areas that really drive value instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day potential manual tasks when it comes to managing your inventory. So Foresight is really built on a couple different pillars where it's built on better forecasting, stronger inventory controls, and operational consistency. So looking at product coming in, look at product going out, and then what does that mean? Obviously we want to provide visibility into the data because we really enjoy looking at the data and the analytics and the insights it provides. So how can we provide that to our partners in a way that they can use to answer questions they may have about their business that maybe they didn't have visibility into before. So for us, it's been a fun journey through Foresight. I think we continue to develop based on our partner needs and kind of what the industry is going to look like. So it's a pretty exciting space to be in, especially as we look at all the emerging technology today.
And Kemp and Grant, just curious, from working with companies that are looking to sell, that have their inventory in place from using tools like the Forshaw tool, the Foresight. How does that make a deal go smoother?
Yeah.
What you're saying, that's a killer question. Ultimately, I don't think PCOs understand what's going to happen when they decide to sell their business. They engage with one or more buyers, they get one or more offers, they ultimately sign an offer. What comes after that is due diligence, Q of E, quality of earnings, a look at the financials, legal, and close, right? But due diligence in particular is when they look at operations and sales. Certainly chemical cost falls under operations. When a buyer walks in, well, let me back up. They're going to send a list of things that they want to know. There's typically a section on just chemicals. What are you using? What are the labels? Do you have anything in your business that shouldn't be there? So there's that's kind of ethics and efficacy. And we could unwrap a ton of stuff there, but at the end of the day, the buyers are really going into the business from a chemical cost perspective and making sure everything that's being used is being used properly and that it's up to date. And so, your question, Brad, really, as I think about it, it's hard for a PCO to understand that what's sitting on the shelf could impact the sale, but it can. And I don't know if Finn and Tom and Grant want to jump in on that, but it's to me it's a very comprehensive subject. We could talk all day on this, but guys, do you?
I feel like it gets to a kind of a higher level, when you look at product cost, and most PMPs say it should be around 5%, ballpark, depending on the mix of services. But we see a lot of PMPs, or a lot of managers spending more than 5% of their time trying to buy product and manage product. And what we've really tried to achieve is helping PMPs to manage that 5% cost with only 2% of the time. 2% or less of their time. And so we're really trying to give back and create these efficiencies where they have the ability to go out and either sell or service more accounts or work with people and whatever else is required in the business. So I think the users of those systems really show that they can, of those inventory systems, really show that they can manage the system and they can be successful, utilizing tools and tools that really help to scale the business.
Yeah, and I think to us, I mean, a good tool is a simple tool that makes sense. I mean, it takes us again. I mean, I'm all about taking out the manual touches out that don't need to be there. So how can we give that manager back their time to really focus on what's important and what's going to drive, whether it's growth, whether it's scale, whether it's just really business optimization. But I think, building on what Grant, you were saying a little bit earlier, is a clean, well-run warehouse is a sign of a clean, well-run business. And so, how can we support that?
Kemp and Grant, I was curious too, just the flip side of that. Have you ever been involved in deals where some of these chemical related red flags have slowed down the deal? And if so, can you share what some of those were and how they could have been corrected?
Yeah, I think I've been part of transactions during due diligence where we were asked to provide estimates for chemical inventory, but the seller of the business didn't really know how much they had. They had warehouses full of chemicals, but they hadn't really counted them or managed them. They did a once a year estimate, and they would provide that to their insurance broker, but maybe that wasn't absolutely reflective of everything they had in stock. So there was a little bit of time and delay and a lot of contention around, well, how much inventory is really there and how much inventory is really needed. Because one thing that they're looking at is, well, how much do you actually need to spend over the next 90 days in terms of inventory? And it's kind of like a car at a rental facility, right? You got to return it with a full tank of gas. Well, buyers typically expect you to turn in the business with a full shelf of inventory, and you need to be able to tell them, well, how much inventory do you really need to run for 30 or 60 days? But if you're not tracking that, it can get really complicated, right? And then we spend a lot of time debating that. Well, do I need to buy more inventory? Do I need to sell some inventory? Who knows, and there's not one
Try to
best
turn it back
strategy, right?
in.
Yeah. There's not one
Yeah.
best strategy because some people purchase a bunch of inventory at the beginning of the year because, chemical providers offer steep discounts, and maybe that steep discount is worth tying up that cash for the year. But management just needs to be able to tell the story of why they chose to make those purchases and how much they have on the shelf. And I think that all just comes back to having that data available and being able to tell your story.
Making an informed decision that aligns with those business goals. So yeah, having the details, very important.
The details matter. And then I think the other piece of your question, Brad, certainly over the years, we've been involved in transactions where there's chemicals on the shelf that shouldn't be there anymore. And the short version of that, when that happens, and it does, I mean, that's the reality of our industry, right? That's why the buyers want a chemical inventory and they want to review it before the sale. If there's something that shouldn't be there, basically the buyer is going to demand that that product is removed from the facility before close. Wherever it goes, but it's got to be gone the day of close, whether it goes to the seller's home or, to some government agency that gets rid of it properly. The demand by the buyer pre-close is going to be that cannot be here the day of close. It's got to be gone. And so that's how those things get handled. To your question, yes, we've dealt with them. Those issues, they do exist. The other piece of that question would be also inside of an acquisition, and maybe this is a little bit off course, but maybe not too much, is that most transactions are going to have a phase one environmental, in some cases a phase two environmental. And so to the degree that you've got products that are not being handled right, or the wrong products, those can show up in soil samples, and that gets in the way of the deal too. So I think this conversation is intriguing because, yes, I think it's financial and chemical based and those sorts of things, but it's behavioral. How are you running the business, and how are you managing the business, and how are you managing the products in that business? And it's not just what's on the shelf, but if you're not managing it right, it could be what's on the property, or unfortunately in some cases even in the ground. And those are when deals get paused until things get straightened out legally. And it goes very quickly. And for the people that are listening to this, it goes from a chemical inventory question to maybe an environmental question to a legal question rapidly, very rapidly.
Now, I like that too, but without a plan, we see personalities take over. And so there's certain personalities that never want to run out of product, and they'll have enough product in there for 6 months or a year or even longer. And there's other personalities that don't want to spend money. And so they're always running out of products. And so really, I think it's important to have a plan to fall back on, and some type of guardrails to keep the inventory level in a position where you feel like it's safe for the business.
Yeah, and I'd say where we've seen success there too is where that I'm gonna call it operational diligence is kind of ingrained in the culture, right? If that's part of the onboarding, part of the training, part of the expectation that there is a plan and that there's a process to follow, and it's a little easier to manage, or at least from what we've seen, a little easier to successfully manage those levels when it's already part of the culture. It's just a known thing.
This is maybe a follow-up for Tom and Finn, but Tom, when I hear you talk about like empty shelf or overflowing shelf, does Forshaw, or should any and all chemical vendors, your competitors included, whether it's foresight or salespeople, go in and help owners with what I would call par levels, normalizing inventory, those sorts of things? Help people out there sort of understand what that should look and feel like from like best practices and people that do what you do, supporting business owners or business managers.
Yeah, so I think all distributors should be able to look at purchase histories, and really identify the trends, and connecting those purchases back to that company's revenue. How consistent are their buying habits compared to when they utilize the product, and now using different tools to help forecast the needs based on services that are expected to take place, really do help to dial into that just-in-time inventory. There's definitely a case for buying during manufacturer promotions, or at year end before tax season. But from a general consistency standpoint, it's fairly simple to look at or to calculate what is the need in the next 30 days, and make sure we supply that need.
And then, guys, I know we've talked a lot about issues that can arise from, poor management of chemicals and also some of the tools that can address that. So, question for just kind of I'll leave it for anyone who wants to answer was if an owner plans to sell in the next few years, can you give us like 2 or 3 steps that they should take right now to clean up and systemize chemical inventory?
I mean, get on a system. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll shamelessly plug Foresight. That's been my passion for the past, years, because I really enjoy it. But I mean, I think the benefits that people get out of really having a system and a process to go through. And again, having that paper trail of here's exactly what happened, here's when and where the product came in, here's where it was stored, and here's when and where it was used by whom. So I think that adds a real level of credibility and reliability to any business, but particularly to those that are looking to sell in the next couple of years. You really need that kind of that paper trail rather than it's kind of being a gray area where M&S is concerned. I think that being able to visualize it, to show exactly what you have in inventory right now versus what you used to have and describe why that may be the case. I mean, that's been a huge area that we've been able to learn about and support through our partners.
Yeah, I would add to that accountability. Somebody that so if you're out there and you own a pest control company or you're managing one, hopefully you have a chemical room where things are locked and controlled. Hopefully you have an inventory process that's daily. If you have a technician that says they need something, they should bring an empty to get the full. That there's a record of the movement of the inventory by technician from the chemical room, from the shelf to the truck, and that whoever's running the chemical room, that maybe the owner and that person have the keys, otherwise it's locked, and there's real accountability. And then that leads to the financial benefits, right? You get a real good feel for the flow of, who's using what, how often are they using it, how often does it need to be replaced, how often are we ordering, and then that starts to hit the P&L, and then that leads to better profitability, and then ultimately to better enterprise value when you go to sell. I would say, Brad, to your question, it is the technology, it's the tracking, but it's the accountability at an operational level on the ground. Who owns this subject? And somebody should. It should not be we unlock the chemical room every morning and take whatever you need. That's not inventory management or control. And back to sort of that due diligence, when you get into that, you're going to have to explain these things anyway. So, the buyers are sophisticated, and they're going to understand what good control is and what it should sound like and look like when they get there.
Yeah, we feel like buyers pay for margin, predictability, and scalability. And so inventory management impacts revenue, recurring revenue, gross margin, and EBITDA. So and it really does, it does impact the areas that help. Number one, the PMPs earn money, and number two, increase their enterprise value when they do decide to sell.
And
All
I
right,
would
guys.
say one other piece to that
Yeah.
too, Tom, is also don't forget to go do truck inspections. And on those truck inspections, not only are you looking for maintenance, right, issues and safety issues, but you should be looking at the quality of the chemical inventory and the quality of the chemical inventory management on every single vehicle. And that can relay back into training and all kinds of things. But I think my bigger point is there's not only chemical management and controls on the shelf, but they're on the fleet. as well. And that's an easy one, I think, to forget.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I think there were really some great discussions here about how discipline systems matter. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on before I wrap things up?
I just, from my perspective, I want to say thank you, not only to GIE and Brad, you and your team and PCT, but certainly Finn and Tom. You guys were incredibly grateful for you guys making the time. Feel like this is a super important subject to sort of get after for folks out there, and we're incredibly grateful for y'all taking the time to help us out with that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say thank you to Brad as well, and you, Kemp, and Grant. We appreciate being here and sharing, some of what we see in the industry from the view of the distributor. But I'd also like to say that distributors, really our role is to help our customer partners see around corners. So I would really encourage PMPs to create the partnerships with your distributor and then also with your manufacturers and get the resources and the support that is available out there to help grow your business, because there are a lot of knowledgeable people in the industry that are willing to share and willing to support businesses around the country.
Well, thank you, Tom and Finn, and also to Kemp Anderson and Grant Sinnott. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to, break down the sort of operational realities behind chemical inventory management. Again, thought there were really some great discussions for all of PCT's readers. So thank you again, and join us for future Routes to Riches episodes as we continue to explore practical steps that pest control owners can take to build stronger, more transferable businesses. Thanks, everybody.